हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल जर्मन गीक। और आज हम लेसन 20 स्टार्ट करेंगे A1 का, जहाँ पे वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट Untrennbare Verben, जिसको हम नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स भी कहते हैं। इन माय प्रीवियस वीडियो वी कवर्ड Trennbare Verben, विच इज़ वन ऑफ द वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक इन जर्मन लैंग्वेज ग्रामर। एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है Trennbare Verben, so if you have not watched that video, I would suggest you to go and watch that video. And in today's lesson I'm going to cover Untrennbare Verben, जिसको हम नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स भी कहते हैं. So let's get started without delay. So A1 lesson 20 non-separable verbs Untrennbare Verben. सेपरेबल वर्ब्स को हम trennbare Verben बोलते थे और उनसेपरेबल नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स को हम Untrennbare Verben बोलेंगे. Now what are the learning objectives? First we are going to understand what are Untrennbare Verben. Untrennbare Verben क्या होता है, नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स क्या होता है. सेकेंडली वी आर गोइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड उनका पोजिशन क्या है सेंटेंस में, वॉट इज़ देयर पोजिशन इन अ सेंटेंस. थर्ड वी आर गोइंग टू अंडरस्टैंड द कॉन्जुगेशन. ठीक है, ट्रेनबारा वर्ब का उन कॉन्जुगेशन हमने देखा था इन द प्रीवियस वीडियो. नाउ उन ट्रेनबारा वर्बन जो नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स है वो कॉन्जुगेट कैसे होते हैं, बिकॉज कॉन्जुगेशन इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट इन जर्मन लैंग्वेज. Now, lastly, we are going to see various Untrennbare Verben. So, let's first look at trennbares verb, which is aufstehen, which means to get up, and untrennbares verb, which is verstehen. Now, here if you see, this is trennbare verb. The first verb is trennbare, aufstehen, which means to get up. This is trennbares verb, and untrennbares verb is verstehen, which means to understand. Okay, now if you look at both the verbs, it looks similar, right? The first verb has auf as the prefix, and second verb has the second verb has fer as prefix. Okay, and the verb in both the verbs, by the verb I mean the main verb, the infinitive verb which both the verbs have is stehen. Now what is the meaning of stehen? Stehen means to stand, but stehen will be conjugated and placed at the second position, and auf goes at the end. Now verstehen is also made of prefix fer and stehen. So in both the cases, verb has a prefix and the second part, so this is the first part fer, which is prefix, and the second part is a normal verb stehen. So it is very important to understand what is the difference between trennbare verb and untrennbare verb. सेपरेबल वर्ब्स और नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब्स में क्या डिफरेंस है? तो सेपरेबल वर्ब सेपरेट होता है, जैसे aufstehen. अगेन इफ यू हैव नॉट watched my video on separable verbs, trennbare verben, then I will paste the link in the description below, and I would suggest you to go and watch that video. Only then will you be able to understand whole the entire topic. So aufstehen में दिस इज़ ट्रेनबारस वर्ब और ये सेपरेट होता है. और हमने प्रीवियस वीडियो में इसके पोजिशनिंग, सेंटेंस में कहाँ है, कौन सा वर्ब कॉन्जुगेट हो रहा है, कौन सा वर्ब प्रीफिक्स कहाँ जा रहा है, ये सारे चीज़ों को कवर किया है. सो aufstehen मीन्स टू गेट अप. aufstehen सेपरेट हो जाएगा क्योंकि ये ट्रेनबारस वर्ब है, सेपरेबल वर्ब है. और verstehen नॉन सेपरेबल वर्ब है, ये untrennbares verb है और ये सेपरेट नहीं होता है. नाउ इफ यू सी stehen, which means to stand, stehen which means to stand in both the verbs, but with the addition of the prefix auf, it has changed, the meaning has changed, which means to get up, and with the addition of prefix fer, again the meaning has changed, which means to understand. सो इट इज़ वेरी इम्पॉर्टेंट. ऐसा नहीं है कि हम stehen के आगे कुछ भी लगा देंगे तो it would mean that only. No, with the change of the prefix the meaning also changes. So it is very important to understand that. Now, what is the second thing that's important? The first verb is trennbare verb and the second verb is untrennbare verb, where you can separate the prefix. In the first verb, you can separate the prefix. So you have to use the verb as a whole. The another basic difference between both the verbs is the betonung. Betonung means intonation. So intonation क्या होता है? Emphasis. You know, the up and down in the speech. So the up and down in the pronunciation as we speak. So in case of trennbare verb, the intonation or emphasis is on the prefix. Okay, aufstehen. So if you could hear and notice the pronunciation, the emphasis is on the prefix, on auf, aufstehen. In case of untrennbare verb, the intonation is not on the prefix, verstehen. Okay, if you notice the difference, there is emphasis on auf, but there is no emphasis on ver. So verstehen, to understand. So this is one of the very basic difference between both the verbs. Now let's see a few example to understand that. So als Vollverb, which means as main verb. Hey, here you could see the verb verstehen, which has been conjugated. Okay, now let's see, look at the position. Er versteht mich gut, which means he understands me well. Now if you look at the positioning, verb is at the second position, okay, which is the thumb rule. Only in you know या नाइन फ्रागन में verb second position पे नहीं होता है, and we have also discussed a lot of other varieties around this in one of my previous videos. So this again as a verb will be on the second position, will be at the second position. It will be conjugated with the subject er. It will be conjugated. We have also covered the conjugation, how the verb is conjugated, in one of my videos. I would really recommend you to go and watch those videos so that you understand what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to make you understand. So verstehen, versteht gets conjugated with the subject er. It is at the second position and it is not separated. Now what I'm saying when what I mean when I'm saying it is not separated, that you will only understand when you will go and watch the video of trennbare Verben, separable verbs, because there the positioning of the verb is completely different in a sentence, because the verb there gets separated and the verb here does not get separated. Okay, now moving on. Now here again, V-Frage. Where is the positioning of the verb in V-Fragen? So for example, warum verstehst du mich nicht? Why don't you understand me? So here the verb is again at the second position and conjugated. Conjugated with what? With du, because du is the subject. Now coming to Ja Nein Fragen. Just a while ago, as I mentioned, Ja Nein Fragen. Verstehst du mich? Do you understand me? वहाँ पे verb का positioning first पे होता है. Okay, so in Ja Nein Fragen, like all other verbs, the verbs is at the first position and conjugated, and the prefix does not separate. The prefix does not separate because it is non-separable verb, because it is untrennbare Verb. So verstehst du mich? Do you understand me? Now what happens to untrennbare Verben with modal verbs? Okay, modal verbs we will be covering in one of our lessons ahead. The conjugated modal verb will be at the second position. Now, ich kann dich verstehen. I can understand you. Sorry for this question mark. This shouldn't be here. This is by mistake. So you can ignore this. Ich kann dich verstehen. Now, können is here modal verb. Since we have not covered, I would just mention you this, that können is one of the modal verb, and this has been conjugated with the subject ich, and this is at the second position. So when we are using untrennbare verb with modal verb, what is the positioning? The modal verb will come at the second position. It will be conjugated, whereas the untrennbare verb, the non-separable verb, will stand at the end. Like here, if you could see, verstehen. This is untrennbare verb. This is at the end. It is in its infinitive form. It will not be conjugated. So, ich kann dich verstehen. I can understand you. Now, since the prefix is not going to be separated from the verb in untrennbare verb, the conjugation is very simple, pretty much what we have already discussed in my previous videos, in which we have already seen the conjugation of the verb. So the conjugation is very simple depending on whether the verb is regular or irregular. Okay, so let's look at the conjugation. I have taken an example, again the same verb, verstehen. So, ich verstehe, du verstehst, sie verstehen, sie es versteht, wir verstehen, ihr versteht, sie verstehen und sie verstehen. So, and if you want to learn the conjugation of regular and irregular verbs, you can again watch my previous video on regular and irregular verbs. So this is pretty much the conjugation. This is how the untrennbare verb, the non-separable verbs, are conjugated. Now let's go through few untrennbare Verben. Now the first is be. The prefix is be. The verb is bekommen, which means to get. Wir bekommen bald eine neue Lehrerin. Soon we will get a new teacher. The second verb is bezahlen, which means to pay. Kannst du bitte heute bezahlen? Ich habe kein Geld. Can you pay today, please? I have no money. So again, untrennbares Verb. And if you notice here, modal verb is at the beginning because it is Ja-Nein Fragen, conjugated with the subject du, and the untrennbares verb, the non-separable verb, goes at the end in its infinitive form and is not conjugated. So, kannst du bitte heute bezahlen? Ich habe kein Geld. Can you pay today, please? I have no money. Moving on, the second prefix here is emp. Now let's look at the verbs. The first verb with emp is empfehlen, which means to recommend. Herr Ober, was empfehlen Sie mir heute? So Herr Ober here means waiter. Herr Ober means waiter. What would you recommend me today? So again, if you look at the positioning, it is conjugated with the subject sie at the second position. The second verb is empfangen, which means to receive. Empfängt seine Gäste herzlich. Now, here, empfangen is irregular verb. The conjugation hence is RCS and which is empfängt. Okay, this has changed. Okay, empfängt seine Gäste herzlich. So, A will take umlaut here. Okay, hence empfangen is irregular verb. What is the meaning of this sentence? He receives his guests warmly. Now, the third kind of prefix is ent that you will come across in untrennbares Verb. The verb with ent is entdecken, which means to discover. Mein Sohn entdeckt jeden Tag etwas Neues. My son discovers something new every day. So if you see the positioning, it is at the second position, conjugated with zone. So RZS, and the position is second without being separated. Now the second verb with ent is entleeren, which means to empty. Die Schule entleert den Pool einmal pro Monat. The school empties, drains the pool once a month. So again, if you see, it is at the second position conjugated with the subject. Now moving on, this other kind of prefix is er. Erzählen, which means to narrate, to tell. Ich erzähle ihnen keine Geschichten. I am not telling them any stories. Ich erzähle ihnen keine Geschichten. Now, erzähle here is at the second position and is conjugated with the subject ich. The other verb with is erkennen, which means to recognize. Erkennst du jemanden? Do you recognize anyone? Now this is again Ja-Nein Fragen, hence the verb is at the first position conjugated with the subject du. Moving on, the other kind of verb, the other kind of prefix is ge. So the verb is gehören, which means to belong. Die Tasche gehört mir. The bag belongs to me. So again at the second position and is conjugated with the subject Tasche. The second verb with ge is gefallen, which means to please, to appeal. Du gefällst mir. I like you. Now these two verbs are dative verbs. We have not done dative, but I am just mentioning you here that these two verbs are dative verbs. When we will do dative, you will understand it better. So we will be doing dative in detail in the upcoming lessons. Now the other kind of prefix is miss. Missbrauchen, which means to misuse. Du missbrauchst deine Autorität. You are misusing your authority. So missbrauchen conjugated at the second place, conjugated with the subject du. The other verb with miss is missverstehen, okay, which means to misunderstand. In der Prüfung kann man die Fragen manchmal missverstehen. Here it is a typing mistake, so here it should be E. In der Prüfung kann man die Fragen manchmal missverstehen. Sometimes one can misunderstand the questions in the exam. Now here again, this is a sentence with modal verb können and it has been conjugated here at the second place, and this is at the end in its infinitive form and is not separated, not conjugated. Missverstehen, which means to misunderstand. The other kind of prefix is fair, which we just saw in verstehen. So what are the other verbs with fair? Verkaufen, which means to sell. Du verkaufst Schuhe. You sell shoes. So verkaufst at the second position conjugated with the subject du. Now the other verb is verlieren, which means to lose. Verliert immer. He always loses. So verlieren conjugated with the subject and is at the second position. Now the last kind of prefix is zer. Verb zerstören, which means to destroy. Ein Erdbeben kann viele Gebäude zerstören. Erdbeben means earthquake. So an earthquake can destroy many buildings. So again, this is the sentence with modal verb, which is at the second position, conjugated, and the verb is in its infinitive form at the end. Now, the last verb is zerkleinern, which means to crush, to chop or shred. Ich muss die Gemüse für die Suppe zerkleinern. So here the sentence is again with modal verb müssen, which is at the second place, and this is conjugated with the subject ich, and the untrennbare verb, the non-separable verb, is in its infinitive form at the end. So the meaning of this sentence is I need to chop up the vegetables for the soup. So I hope these verbs are clear to you. All the prefixes that we just did make the verbs untrennbar. I'm sure you will find them easy to learn. You will get a hold of it surely over the time, so you don't need to worry. And if you have liked this video, if you have understood what I've just explained, then do give me a thumbs up, share and subscribe. You know the drill. And I will see you guys in the next video. Danke und auf Wiedersehen.